The Mafia boss's fiancée seized the plus-size maid by her uniform and ripped it apart. "Know your place!" Isabella snapped, shoving Adeline to the floor. The torn collar slipped from her shoulder, exposing a long, twisted burn scar. Silence swallowed the room. Elena Castelli stared at it, trembling. "That scar," she whispered. Then Lorenzo walked in. He saw his mother's face first, and knew, before anyone spoke, that something had just shattered forever. Lorenzo did not raise his voice. He never needed to. His gaze moved from his mother's trembling face to Adeline on the marble floor, then to the torn black fabric hanging from Isabella's hand. "Who did this?" No one answered. Adeline quickly pulled the ruined collar over her shoulder, but the movement came too late. Elena had already seen the scar. Isabella recovered first. "Lorenzo, this is being made into something it isn't." His eyes settled on her. "I asked who did this." The silence changed. A moment earlier, Adeline had been the one exposed before a room filled with wealthy guests, staff members, and people powerful enough to make her feel painfully small. Now every eye had shifted toward Isabella. Adeline pushed herself upright. "It's all right, Mr. Castelli." "No," Lorenzo said quietly. "It isn't." There was no tenderness in his tone, but there was something Adeline had rarely heard directed toward someone in her position. Respect. He stepped aside rather than reaching for her, giving her room to stand without turning his protection into another humiliation. "I can change my uniform," Adeline said. "You shouldn't have to disappear because someone else behaved disgracefully." Isabella's expression tightened. "She was embarrassing me." Adeline looked at her in disbelief. "I was carrying champagne glasses." "You were flirting with my fiancée." A murmur passed through the room. Earlier that afternoon, an unexpected seating problem had nearly placed two important guests, men whose companies were negotiating a major agreement with Castelli Holdings, at the same table, despite a bitter personal dispute. Adeline had noticed the mistake and quietly corrected it before either man arrived. Lorenzo had thanked her. Nothing more. But Isabella had seen his smile. Apparently that had been enough. "Isabella," Lorenzo said, "I thanked an employee for solving a problem." She enjoyed the attention. Adeline's cheeks burned. Being shoved had hurt less than hearing herself discussed, as though she were not standing there. Before she could answer, Elena moved toward her. "Please." The older woman's voice was so fragile that everyone stopped. Elena was staring at Adeline's shoulder. "May I see it again?" Adeline instinctively gripped the torn fabric. The scar was something she had learned to live with, but not something she offered to strangers. It crossed from near her collarbone toward her shoulder in uneven, pale ridges, an old wound that had healed long ago without ever completely disappearing. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Castelli." Elena swallowed. "Where did you get that scar?" Lorenzo looked sharply at his mother. "Mom?" She seemed not to hear him. Adeline lowered her eyes. "It happened a long time ago." "How long?" Something in Elena's expression made Adeline hesitate. Nearly everyone else in the room had become irrelevant to her. Even Isabella's accusation seemed to have vanished beneath the weight of that question. "I was young," Adeline said carefully. "It was an accident." Elena shook her head. "No." The single word came out almost as a breath. Lorenzo crossed the remaining distance to his mother. "What is it?" Elena reached for his arm as if suddenly needing something solid beneath her hand. For the first time Adeline had ever seen her, the elegant matriarch of the Castelli family looked frightened. Not frightened of the scar, frightened of what it might mean. Isabella stepped forward. Can we please stop turning this servant into the center of our engagement celebration? Lorenzo turned his head. The look he gave her silenced her immediately. Then Elena whispered, "The celebration can wait." Her eyes returned to Adeline. "Please tell me where it happened." Adeline's fingers tightened around her collar. She could lie. For reasons she could not explain, every instinct told her to lie. But Elena was crying now. Quietly. Almost 20 years had passed since the night Adeline had smelled smoke pouring beneath an apartment door and heard a child screaming somewhere beyond it. She had spent years teaching herself not to remember what came next: the heat, the collapsing hallway, the little girl clinging to her neck, and the terrible burning pain across her shoulder as she carried the child toward the stairs. Adeline stared at Elena. It was a fire. Elena closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. When she opened them again, there was recognition in her face. Not certainty yet. Something more dangerous. Hope. "There was an apartment building," Elena whispered. "Almost 20 years ago." Adeline stopped breathing. Elena's hand tightened around Lorenzo's arm. "And my daughter was trapped inside." Elena's words seemed to pull the entire room backward through time. "It was just before Christmas," she said. "Lucia was 7. Lorenzo went still. He knew the story. Everyone in the Castelli family did. But Elena rarely spoke about that night. She had taken Lucia to visit an elderly family friend in an apartment building across town. Elena had stepped downstairs for less than 10 minutes when someone smelled smoke. By the time she returned, the hallway was filling with people. Then came the screaming. "The fire started 2 floors below," Elena said. "It moved faster than anyone understood." Smoke had swallowed the stairwell. Residents stumbled outside, coughing, some barefoot, some carrying children. Elena searched every face. Lucia was not among them. She tried to run inside. A neighbor caught her around the waist. "I could hear my daughter screaming from an upstairs window." Elena's voice broke. Adelina's hand slowly loosened around her torn collar. The memories she had spent years burying were returning with brutal clarity. Smoke scratching her throat, glass breaking somewhere above her. A woman outside screaming one name again and again. Lucia. Firefighters had been arriving, but confusion consumed the entrance. Residents were shouting about people trapped on different floors. Then someone ran toward the building. A young woman no one knew. Elena remembered seeing her only briefly. She heard me say, "Lucia's apartment number." Adeline closed her eyes. She remembered that too. She had been 19, walking home after finishing a late shift at a bakery. She had seen the smoke before she saw the crowd. Then she had heard Elena. Not words at first, just the sound of a mother realizing her child might die. "I begged her not to go," Elena whispered. "Everyone did." But the young woman disappeared inside. Lorenzo looked from his mother to Adeline. For perhaps 2 minutes there had been nothing. To Elena it had felt like an entire lifetime. Then a firefighter entered. Another followed. Smoke poured through a broken window, and suddenly someone shouted. A figure had appeared near the entrance. The young woman stumbled out, carrying a little girl against her chest. Lucia. Her face was blackened with soot, but she was alive. Elena ran toward them. I remember Lucia reaching for me. Her tears came freely now. And I remember the woman telling me, "She's breathing. Keep her awake." Adeline looked away. Those words had survived inside her too. Elena had taken her daughter. Someone had pulled Adeline backward as part of the ceiling near the entrance collapsed. That was when Elena saw the injury. The young woman's coat had burned through near the shoulder. Beneath it, the skin was badly damaged from her collarbone across the top of her arm. The paramedics tried to treat her, Elena continued, but there were so many injured people. Lucia had begun struggling to breathe. Elena climbed into the ambulance with her. She had looked back once. The stranger who saved her daughter was sitting on the curb while a paramedic examined her shoulder. That was the last time I saw her. Later, Elena returned to find her. No one could give her a name. The young woman had been transported for treatment, but in the chaos, records were incomplete, descriptions conflicted, and nobody Elena contacted could tell her where she had gone afterward. She searched. Hospitals, fire reports, neighborhood contacts, anyone who might remember the stranger who carried Lucia out. Years passed. The Castelli family donated to fire safety programs. Elena continued asking questions whenever some forgotten detail surfaced. Nothing led to her. The scar was the one thing I knew I would recognize, Elena said. Her gaze returned to Adeline's shoulder. I saw where the fire had burned her. Across the room, Isabella no longer looked irritated. She looked unsettled. Regina stood rigid beside the doorway. Lorenzo said nothing. The powerful man who could silence a room with a glance was staring at the maid his fiancée had thrown onto the floor, as though the distance between their lives had suddenly collapsed. Elena stepped closer. I searched for that woman for almost 20 years. Adeline's eyes glistened, but she fought the tears. She had never expected gratitude. She certainly had never expected this. Elena stopped directly in front of her. Adeline. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Were you the woman who carried my daughter out of that fire? Adeline could have denied it. For one strange second, she wanted to. Not because she was ashamed of what she had done, but because she understood what would happen the moment she said yes. The scar would stop being private. The worst night of her life would become a story everyone in this room believed they had a right to hear. Then she looked at Elena. Nearly 20 years of unanswered gratitude were written across the older woman's face. Adeline exhaled. Her name was Lucia. Elena covered her mouth. Lorenzo's expression changed. Adeline continued quietly. She was hiding beside a bathtub when I found her. She had wrapped a wet towel around her face because someone had taught her what to do in a fire. Elena made a broken sound. I taught her that. Adeline nodded. Then yes, Mrs. Castelli. I think I was the woman you were looking for. Elena crossed the distance between them. For an instant, Adeline stiffened, uncertain what was coming. Then Elena embraced her. Not delicately. Not ceremonially. She held Adeline with the desperation of a mother, completing an embrace that had been interrupted almost 20 years earlier. You saved my baby. Adeline closed her eyes. Around them, no one spoke. Even Isabella remained silent. When Elena finally released her, tears streaked the older woman's face. Why didn't you find us? Adeline gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. I didn't know who you were. Later, you must have learned. Eventually. And you still never came. Adeline glanced toward the scar she had covered again. I didn't save her, so someone would owe me something. The answer was so simple that Elena seemed unable to respond. Adeline had spent weeks recovering after the fire. The burn had required painful treatment, and for months, ordinary movements, lifting her arm, carrying groceries, even sleeping on one side, had reminded her of that night. Money had been tight. She had returned to work sooner than she should have. People stared when the scar was visible. Some asked questions with genuine concern. Others looked at her with the uncomfortable fascination people sometimes reserved for damage they were relieved had happened to someone else. Eventually, Adeline learned to cover it. Not because she believed it made her ugly, because she grew tired of explaining. "The firefighters went inside too," she said. "Neighbors helped people down the stairs. Someone gave me a wet cloth before I went in. Someone else caught me when I came out. A lot of people did something that night." "But you brought Lucia out," Lorenzo said. It was the first time he had spoken directly to her since Elena began telling the story. Adeline met his eyes. She was 7. As though that explained everything. Perhaps to her, it did. Lorenzo had spent his adult life around people who carefully calculated the value of every favor. In his world, generosity often arrived with invisible terms attached. Adeline spoke about risking her life as though she had held a door open for a stranger. "You could have died," he said. So could she. There was no performance in the answer, no attempt to appear noble. That unsettled him more than any dramatic confession could have. Elena reached for Adeline's hand. "You have been living in my house for 3 months. Adeline's smile turned faintly amused. "Technically, I live in the staff wing." A surprised laugh escaped Elena through her tears. The tension in the room cracked for half a second. Even Lorenzo's mouth almost curved. Then Adeline became serious again. "I never knew Lucia was your daughter when I accepted this job, I promise." "I believe you," Elena said immediately. Lorenzo believed her too. That realization came with uncomfortable clarity. 3 months of small observations suddenly carried different weight. Adeline quietly helping an elderly gardener finish before a storm. Adeline calming a nervous new server after Regina humiliated him. Adeline returning a diamond bracelet a guest had left beneath a sofa without mentioning that she had found it. None of those things had seemed extraordinary separately. Now Lorenzo understood the pattern. The fire had not made Adeline courageous. It had merely created one dramatic moment in which the courage already inside her became visible. But Adeline noticed the way he was looking at her and stepped back. "Please don't." His brow tightened. "Don't what?" "Turn me into something I'm not." Her voice remained gentle. "I did one thing a long time ago. I'm still the same person who was carrying champagne glasses 20 minutes ago." Lorenzo absorbed that without argument. Then his gaze dropped to her torn uniform. The warmth vanished from his face. Because Adeline was right. What she had done 20 years ago did not erase what had happened 20 minutes ago. And discovering that she had saved Lucia did not change the fact that someone in Lorenzo's house had believed humiliating a maid in public was acceptable. His attention shifted toward Isabella, then Regina. The room seemed to tighten again. Lorenzo's voice was quiet. "Now I want the part of this story I still haven't heard." Isabella paled. Lorenzo looked around at every person who had witnessed the incident. "What exactly happened before I walked into this room?" No one rushed to answer. Lorenzo waited. That was worse than shouting. Finally, one of the servers near the champagne table raised her hand slightly. "Mr. Castelli, I saw what happened." Isabella turned toward her. "You saw part of it." "I saw enough." The young woman swallowed before continuing. She explained that Adeline had been correcting the seating problem when Lorenzo thanked her. Their conversation had lasted less than a minute. There had been no flirting, no touching, nothing secretive. Several guests confirmed it. One older businessman even remembered Adeline preventing an embarrassing confrontation between the two executives. "She saved your staff from a difficult evening," he said. "That appeared to be all." Lorenzo looked at Isabella. So, what happened afterward? Isabella folded her arms. She was still inappropriate. How? She knows how men look at her. The accusation hung in the air. Adeline stared at Isabella, stunned less by the cruelty now than by its absurdity. Lorenzo's expression hardened. That isn't an answer. Regina stepped forward. Mr. Castelli, perhaps Miss Vaughan misunderstood. Adeline has occasionally been overly familiar. Adeline turned toward her. When? Regina hesitated. It was brief, but Lorenzo noticed. So there have been previous incidents, he asked. Regina straightened. Concerns. Documented? Another pause. No. Reported to me? No. To my mother? Regina's composure began to crack. No, sir. Lorenzo nodded once. Then perhaps we should discuss what actually happened today. A second staff member spoke. She had seen Isabella follow Adeline into the reception room after Lorenzo left. Another had heard Isabella accuse Adeline of deliberately attracting Lorenzo's attention. Then came the detail Isabella could not explain away. One of the guests had recorded part of the decorated room moments before the celebration began. In the background of the video, Isabella could clearly be heard ordering Adeline to stay away from Lorenzo. Adeline's response was equally clear. I work here, Miss Vaughan. I cannot avoid speaking to him when he asks me a question. Then Isabella's voice. Women like you always pretend not to know what they're doing. Regina moved quickly. That recording could be misunderstood. Elena looked at her. How? Regina had no answer. The guest lowered his phone. I stopped recording before the uniform was torn, but I saw that too. So did I, another woman said. And I did, said a third. One by one, the room that Isabella had expected to witness Adeline's humiliation became the room that dismantled her version of events. She looked toward Lorenzo. You're really going to trust servants and strangers over me? No, Lorenzo replied. I'm trusting evidence. Her face flushed. This is ridiculous. I was angry. At her? At the situation? What situation? Isabella's voice sharpened. The way you looked at her. There it was. Not seduction. Not misconduct. Jealousy. Lorenzo studied the woman he had intended to marry and seemed to discover something unfamiliar beneath a face he knew well. You tore an employee's clothing because I thanked her? Isabella glanced around and realized too late how small the explanation sounded. She provoked me. Adeline finally spoke. I asked you to let go of my uniform. Isabella's eyes flashed toward her, and you should have walked away. I tried, Regina interrupted. Adeline, enough. Lorenzo turned. No. You've told her enough for the last time tonight. Regina froze. Elena's expression sharpened. What does that mean? Silence returned. A junior housemaid near the doorway looked down nervously. Then she spoke. Mrs. Castelli, Ms. Cole told us not to discuss what happened. Regina went pale. The maid continued. She said Miss Vaughan had been under stress, and that anyone repeating the incident could lose their position. Elena stared at Regina. Did you threaten my staff to conceal this? I was protecting the family from scandal. No, Lorenzo said. You were protecting Isabella from consequences. Regina opened her mouth, then closed it. For 3 months, Adeline had endured her quiet insults, impossible standards, and comments disguised as professional criticism. Now Regina's authority seemed to collapse without anyone raising a hand. Lorenzo turned to Adeline. You should never have been treated this way in my home. Adeline held his gaze. For once, she did not minimize what had happened. Thank you. Then Lorenzo faced Isabella. She reached for him instinctively. Lorenzo, please. We can discuss this privately. He stepped back before her fingers touched his sleeve. His voice remained perfectly calm. We will discuss it. Relief flickered across her face too soon. Lorenzo glanced toward the engagement decorations surrounding them, then back at the woman he was supposed to marry. But you're not leaving yet, Isabella. The relief disappeared. I'm not finished. Isabella stared at Lorenzo as though she were waiting for the man she knew to return. The man who overlooked sharp remarks at dinner. The man who allowed her obsession with appearances because it seemed harmless. The man who had spent months accepting excuses because marriage, in their world, was supposed to involve compromise. But Lorenzo was looking at her differently now. Not with rage, with clarity. Tell me something, he said. If Adeline had no connection to my family, would you believe what you did was acceptable? Isabella blinked. What? If there were no fire, no Lucia, no scar, if Adeline were exactly who you believed she was 20 minutes ago, a maid working in my home, would you regret humiliating her? Isabella opened her mouth. Nothing came. That silence answered him. Adeline felt something shift inside the room. Until that moment, Isabella's cruelty could have been dismissed as one terrible outburst made worse by jealousy. Lorenzo had just exposed something deeper. This was not about Adeline being a hero. It was about whether Isabella believed someone needed to be important before they deserved dignity. I made a mistake, Isabella finally said. No, Lorenzo replied. You discovered information that made your mistake embarrassing. Her expression hardened. You're twisting this. Then correct me. I was jealous because my fiancée was paying attention to another woman. I thanked her. You smiled at her. Lorenzo almost looked surprised. So that justified putting your hands on her? No, but there is no useful sentence after no. Isabella glanced toward the guests. Humiliation was reaching her now, and unlike Adeline, she had spent her entire adult life terrified of it. Her voice dropped. Can we please do this somewhere else? Lorenzo looked around at the witnesses. You chose the audience. Isabella flinched. For the first time, Adeline felt no satisfaction in watching her lose control. Only exhaustion. She did not want Isabella destroyed. She wanted what happened to matter. Lorenzo seemed to understand the distinction. His hand moved slowly toward the engagement ring he wore. Isabella noticed. Her face changed. Lorenzo. He removed it. No. She stepped closer. You cannot end our engagement over a maid. The words had barely left her mouth when she realized what she had said. Lorenzo looked at the ring in his palm. That sentence is exactly why I can. Isabella's composure fractured. Our families have spent months preparing for this. Do you understand what people will say? Yes. The press will tear this apart. Probably. Our business connections will survive. My father can call me himself. Every argument she offered seemed to reveal the same truth. She spoke about reputation, money, status, embarrassment. Not once did she speak about the woman she had shoved to the floor. Isabella's eyes filled. I love you. For the first time, Lorenzo hesitated. Not because he intended to change his decision, because once he had believed her. Perhaps Isabella did love him in the only way she understood love. But love without respect had become something Lorenzo no longer recognized as love at all. You love the life you imagined beside me, he said quietly. Tonight, you showed me what happens when someone threatens that picture. That isn't fair. What wasn't fair was expecting Adeline to accept humiliation because she works for my family. Isabella looked toward Adeline. Something desperate entered her face. I'm sorry. Adeline held her gaze. Maybe Isabella meant it. Maybe she only meant, please make him stop. Adeline could not know. You should be, she said softly. No cruelty, no triumph. That somehow made Isabella look away faster. Lorenzo closed his fingers around the ring. The woman you humiliated gave my family more than you ever understood. Isabella's tears spilled over. She saved Lucia. She gave my mother back her daughter. But even if she had done none of that, what happened tonight would still be wrong. Elena watched her son in silence. That distinction mattered. Adeline saw it too. Lorenzo was not defending her because a scar had suddenly made her worthy. He was acknowledging that she had always been worthy. This engagement is over. The sentence landed quietly. No dramatic shouting followed. The musicians remained silent. Hundreds of white flowers still surrounded the room, arranged for a celebration that would never happen. Isabella stared at Lorenzo for several seconds. Then she understood there was nothing left to negotiate. She turned and walked toward the doors. Regina instinctively moved after her. Ms. Cole. Lorenzo's voice stopped her. Regina turned. You and I will discuss your employment tomorrow. Her face drained of color. Yes, sir. She left separately. Only after the doors closed did Lorenzo look toward Adeline. He did not approach her. He did not transform the moment into something romantic. Instead, he addressed the room. The celebration is cancelled. Please give my family privacy. Guests began leaving quietly. Adeline watched the flowers, the untouched champagne, and the abandoned engagement decorations. She should have felt responsible. A familiar instinct told her she had somehow caused all of this simply by being present. Then Elena squeezed her hand. No, she whispered, seeming to read the guilt on her face. You did not break anything tonight. Adeline looked at her. Elena's eyes moved toward the doors through which Isabella had disappeared. You only revealed what was already broken. Across the room, Lorenzo heard his mother. He said nothing. But when his gaze met Adeline's, gratitude was no longer the only emotion there. There was respect. And beneath it, something neither of them was ready to name. The Castelli family did not allow the story to disappear. 3 weeks later, Elena organized a private gathering at the estate. Adeline had objected from the moment she heard about it. I really don't need a ceremony. Elena looked at her over breakfast. I searched for you for almost 20 years. You can survive one afternoon of being thanked. Adeline smiled despite herself. That sounds suspiciously like an order. It is a mother's request. That sounds worse. Elena laughed. Their relationship had changed quickly, but not unnaturally. Elena never treated Adeline as a curiosity or a debt to be repaid. Instead, she began inviting her to coffee, asking about her life, and discovering the woman behind the memory she had carried for 2 decades. Lorenzo was more careful. He kept his distance when distance was appropriate. But Adeline noticed things. Regina had been dismissed after the household investigation, confirmed she had repeatedly intimidated junior employees, and attempted to conceal Isabella's behavior. New staff policies followed. Complaints could now be reported without passing through a single supervisor. Lorenzo never announced that he had done any of it for Adeline. That was precisely why she noticed. On the afternoon of the gathering, several firefighters who had responded to the apartment fire arrived at the estate, along with former residents and neighbors Elena had managed to locate. Lucia came too. She was no longer the terrified 7-year-old Adeline remembered. She was a grown woman. The moment Lucia saw her, she stopped. Neither woman seemed to know what to say. Then Lucia crossed the room and embraced her. Adeline's eyes closed. "Thank you," Lucia whispered. 2 words, nothing elaborate. They were enough. Later, Elena stood before the guests and told the story. When she reached the part about Adeline entering the building, Adeline shifted uncomfortably beside Lorenzo. "I hate this," she murmured. He glanced at her. "You faced a burning building. That was easier. Fire doesn't make speeches about you." A quiet laugh escaped him. It was one of the first moments between them that felt completely ordinary, and Adeline liked it more than she wanted to admit. When Elena invited her forward, Adeline reluctantly stood before the room. "I'm grateful," she began, "but there's something I need to correct." Elena watched her curiously. "I wasn't alone that night." Adeline looked toward the firefighters. "There were people running into that building while everyone else was trying to escape. Neighbors were knocking on doors. Someone helped an elderly man down 3 flights of stairs. A firefighter pulled me away from falling debris after I came outside." She paused. "If you're going to honor what happened that night, please honor them too." The room became silent. Not the cruel silence that had followed the tearing of her uniform. A different kind. The kind created when people realized they were witnessing character rather than performance. "So that's what I want," Adeline said. "Not a plaque with my name on it. If money is being donated, put it toward burn survivors and emergency response programs, and put everyone's names beside mine." Elena wiped her eyes. Lucia smiled. Across the room, Lorenzo watched Adeline with an expression he no longer bothered to disguise. Admiration. Afterward, the gathering became less formal. Stories replaced speeches. Former neighbors remembered details Adeline had forgotten. A retired firefighter insisted she had been either incredibly brave or completely insane at 19. "Probably both," Adeline admitted. Lorenzo found her later on the terrace, away from the crowd. "You escaped your own ceremony." "I strategically relocated." He leaned against the railing beside her. For several seconds, neither spoke. "You really didn't want anything?" he asked. "I got something." "What?" Adeline looked through the windows. Elena was laughing with Lucia. "I got to see the little girl grew up." Lorenzo followed her gaze. "That's enough?" "It has to be." He studied her profile. "You know, most people I meet want something from me." Adeline gave him a sideways glance. "I want something." His brow lifted. 5 uninterrupted minutes before your mother finds me and makes me meet another person." Lorenzo laughed, not the controlled smile he offered business associates. A genuine laugh. Adeline smiled too. Then their eyes met, and something unexpectedly quiet passed between them. Neither moved closer. Neither needed to. For Lorenzo, gratitude had been simple. Gratitude belonged to the past. What he felt standing beside Adeline had nothing to do with a burning building 20 years ago. It came from the woman who had refused to claim a heroic story for herself. The woman who made his mother laugh. The woman who could tease him without seeming impressed by his name. The woman who had been treated as invisible and somehow never allowed that invisibility to make her cruel. Adeline looked away first. Inside, Elena called her name. "There," Adeline said. "My 5 minutes are over." She headed toward the doors. Lorenzo remained on the terrace. He watched her disappear into the family gathering, not as an employee being invited inside, but as someone Elena had already begun making space for. And for the first time, Lorenzo admitted something to himself. He was no longer looking at Adeline because of what she had done for his family. He was looking at her because of who she was becoming to him. The weeks became months. The Castelli estate slowly returned to normal, although Adeline discovered that normal meant something different now. Elena no longer allowed her to disappear quietly into the staff wing after dinner. Lucia visited more often. Sometimes she and Adeline talked about the fire. More often, they talked about everything else. Lorenzo did the same. At first, their conversations happened accidentally. A cup of coffee in the kitchen before sunrise. A shared complaint about Elena's determination to reorganize the garden. A late evening when Adeline found Lorenzo eating alone after a 12-hour day and informed him that even feared businessmen required actual food. "You give orders very easily for someone who works for me," he said. Adeline placed a plate in front of him. "You can fire me after dessert." He smiled. He never did. Over time, Lorenzo learned details no scar could have revealed. Adeline hated expensive coffee, but loved terrible supermarket chocolate. She read mystery novels and almost always guessed the ending. She laughed hardest when she was trying not to laugh at all. Adeline discovered things too. Behind Lorenzo's intimidating reputation was a man who called his mother every day when traveling. A man who remembered employees' children by name. A man who could command a boardroom without hesitation, but became strangely helpless whenever Elena asked whether he was eating enough. Their relationship changed in increments too small to notice individually. Until one evening, 6 months after the engagement ended, Lorenzo found Adeline sitting beneath the garden lights. He sat beside her. "You've been avoiding me." Adeline smiled faintly. "I've been trying not to." "That sounds worse." "It probably is." Silence settled between them. Lorenzo waited. Eventually, Adeline looked at him. "I need to know something." "Ask." "If there had never been a fire, would you still be sitting here?" He understood immediately. "Adeline, I'm serious." She turned toward him. "I know what your family feels. I understand Elena's gratitude, Lucia's too. But gratitude can become confusing when it lasts long enough." Her voice softened. "I don't want to become a debt you spend your life trying to repay." Lorenzo said nothing for several seconds. Then he asked, "Do you remember the first time I noticed you?" Adeline raised an eyebrow. "The seating disaster?" "No." She waited. 2 months before that, Regina blamed a new server for breaking a crystal decanter. Adeline remembered. "You stepped forward and said you had knocked it over," Lorenzo continued. "I did." "No, you didn't." Her eyes widened slightly. Lorenzo almost smiled. "The security camera showed what happened. The boy broke it." Adeline sighed. "He was 18. Regina was going to fire him. And you were willing to take responsibility?" "He needed the job more than I did." "That was when I noticed you." Adeline looked down. "The scar explained something about your past," Lorenzo said. "It didn't introduce me to you." Her eyes returned to his. "I know how you treat people when nobody important is watching. I know you use humor when you're uncomfortable. I know you pretend Elena's attention annoys you because admitting you love it would make you cry." Adeline gave him an offended look. "That last one is speculation. It's extremely well-supported speculation." She laughed. The sound faded slowly. Lorenzo's expression softened. "I am grateful to you. I always will be." He did not deny it. "But gratitude isn't why I look for you when I enter a room." Adeline stopped smiling. "It isn't why I remember what makes you laugh. It isn't why a 5-minute conversation with you somehow becomes the best part of my day." He moved no closer. The choice remained hers. I fell in love with the woman you are now, Adeline, not the girl who ran into that building. Her eyes filled. For years, people had looked at her and noticed something first: her body, her uniform, her scar, her social position. Lorenzo had seen all of those things. Then he had kept looking. "What if I say I need time?" she whispered. "I'll give you time. What if I say this scares me? Then we go slowly. And if your mother starts planning our wedding tomorrow?" Lorenzo considered that. "We may have to leave the country." Adeline laughed through her tears. Then, slowly, she placed her hand over his. Not a promise of forever. Not yet. Something smaller. Something more honest. Permission to begin. Months later, when Lorenzo finally told her he loved her again, Adeline did not question why. She already knew. And when she told him she loved him too, it was not because he had rescued her from humiliation or because his family had given her a place to belong. It was because, somewhere between quiet breakfasts, ridiculous jokes, difficult conversations, and patient silences, Lorenzo had become home. For the first time in her life, Adeline understood that being loved did not require becoming smaller, prettier, quieter, or easier for someone else to accept. She only had to be seen, and Lorenzo saw her. 1 year later, Adeline stood beneath the lights of a charity hall filled with burn survivors, firefighters, families, and volunteers. This time, she had agreed to be there. The foundation created after Elena's gathering had already helped dozens of survivors with rehabilitation costs and funded new emergency response programs across the city. Adeline had insisted on one rule from the beginning: no single hero. Every plaque carried the names of firefighters, neighbors, medical workers, and ordinary people who had stepped forward when someone needed help. Lorenzo stood beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. Elena and Lucia were nearby when a little girl approached Adeline after the ceremony. The child had a small burn scar along one arm. She looked at Adeline's shoulder, visible above the neckline of her dress. Adeline no longer covered it automatically. "Does it still hurt?" the girl asked. "Sometimes." The child considered that. Then she asked the question adults were usually too polite to ask. "Do you wish it would disappear?" Adeline looked down at the pale, uneven line crossing her shoulder. For yours, she had treated it as something private. Then Isabella had exposed it before an entire room, intending to make Adeline feel small. Instead, that moment had returned a daughter to the woman who had spent 20 years searching for her rescuer. It had uncovered cruelty. It had created justice. And eventually, unexpectedly, it had opened the door to love. Adeline smiled. "No." The girl blinked. "Really?" "Really?" Adeline touched the scar gently. "Because without it," her eyes found Lorenzo. "I never would have found my future." Lorenzo reached for her hand. Adeline let him take it. But she looked back at the child. "That doesn't mean I'm glad I was hurt," she said. "It means something painful happened to me, and I decided it didn't get to decide what the rest of my life would be." The girl smiled. Behind them, Elena wiped away tears. "You promised you wouldn't cry," Adeline teased. "I lied." Elena embraced her. Lucia joined them, laughing, and Lorenzo shook his head as his mother refused to let anyone escape. Then applause began. One person stood, then another. Soon the entire room was on its feet. Adeline looked around at the family surrounding her. The scar remained. So did the memory. But neither felt like something she needed to hide anymore. Lorenzo squeezed her hand, and Adeline squeezed back. Once the scar had been proof of what fire had taken from her. Now it reminded her of everything life had returned. Courage, family, love, and finally, home.